All right, so today we're diving into some seriously old school Okinawa. We're talking way, way back before written records, before even the time periods we usually discuss.
The time before history, even. It really is like trying to solve a puzzle with only a few pieces, like Kerr says in the book.
Okinawa, the history of an island people, right?
Huh.
I mean, we've got Kerr's work to guide us at least. So what do we have? We've got these arrowheads, tools made of bone. It's amazing what survives, right?
It is, and those little pieces, they tell us so much. Like, even back then, they weren't just surviving, they were making art.
He mentions pottery, right? With little decorations.
Yeah, Kerr calls it a primitive aesthetic sense, but it's there, you know? They were creating.
It's mind-blowing. Thinking about those things lasting centuries under the ground, because I'm chills. But we don't have a lot to go on, do we? I mean, Kerr talks about how there's almost no human remains.
Right, and that's one of the biggest mysteries. Without skeletons, we can't know for sure a lot about them, physically, how they lived, how they died.
It's frustrating in a way, right? Like, we're almost there, but missing that key piece. And then to make it even more interesting, Kerr throws this curveball. He says the Stone Age in Yaeyama, down south in the Yaeyama Islands, might have lasted until the 14th century. The 14th century.
It's crazy, right? Compared to most of the world, that is so late. And it makes you wonder, why? Were they isolated? Did something make stone tools better for them for longer? We just don't know.
Okay, so we've got this Stone Age lasting way longer than you'd expect in Yaeyama, but it's not like they were totally cut off down there, right?
Right. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. Kerr makes a big deal about how Okinawa was like this crossroads.
Yeah. Everyone's passing through, leaving a little something behind.
Exactly. And one of those influences, he calls it the Yaeyama culture. It's got these connections even further south, Indonesia, Melanesia, those areas.
Okay, so we're not just talking about Japan anymore. We're talking long-distance stuff.
Yeah, and one example Kerr gives is their boats, how they built them. They were using planks, which wasn't so much the style up north in mainland Japan at that time.
So you got to be thinking open ocean voyages with these boats. Trade, maybe even migrations, who knows?
Exactly, and that's just one piece. On top of that, you've got Chinese influence too. Kerr talks about finding pottery from the early Ming dynasty mixed in with the older stuff.
Wow. Okay, so we've got layers upon layers here. Ming Dynasty. For people who don't have their Chinese dynasties memorized, when was that again?
So we're talking about the 1300s, roughly. It's pretty late in the game, relatively speaking. But then you've also got stuff from even earlier in Japan, the Jomon period, making its way down, too. It's a real mix.
Okay, so just a quick reminder, Jomon, that's what, like 10,000 BC?
Even earlier, actually, more like 14,000 BC to 300 BC, give or take. They were big on pottery, hence the name, cord-marked, and mostly hunter-gatherers. So finding their traces down in Okinawa really tells you something.
Yeah, it's like this recipe with ingredients from all over. You wouldn't think they'd go together, but...
Yeah, but they make something new and unique, right? And it's not just the stuff they left behind, it's also in the people themselves.
You mean like physically?
Yeah, Kerr talks about physical features, but also language. There are connections to people in southern Japan, sure, but then there are these little hints of something else in the language, maybe even Indonesian influence. It's really fascinating.
Wow, so it's like Okinawa's identity was being shaped from all sides. North, south, who knows where else. It's like a puzzle, but instead of one picture, you're putting together pieces from a bunch of different ones.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk about pottery shards and ancient boats, but what I find really cool is how this ancient history, it's not just buried in the ground, it's still alive in Okinawa today.
You're right, and Kerr points out some amazing examples. It's like these traditions, they're woven into the culture.
Yeah, like those curved jewels he mentions,
Oh,
Magatama, right.
Right, Magatama.
Yeah.
Used by priestesses, and they go way back, like ancient Japan, even Korea.
Wow. So we're not just talking about something unique to Okinawa, but something with these deep, deep roots.
Exactly. And here's the thing. You find Magatama in mainland Japan, sure, but usually in museums. In Okinawa, they're still used. They're part of life.
That's amazing when you think about it, a direct connection to that ancient past. And it's not just objects. Kerr talks about this hummingbird arrow, apparently super rare even in mainland Japan, but still used in Okinawa for some ceremonies. Do you know much about that?
Well, it shows you it's not just about holding on to old things. It's about what they mean. The hummingbird arrow, they use it for blessings, for launching canoes. I mean, imagine something that's potentially been done for centuries. That's powerful.
It really is. And it gets even more interesting. Kerr talks about the way some Okinawan houses are built. He compares them to houses in Taiwan.
Yeah, the architecture. He talks about the raised platforms, the thatched roofs. It makes you wonder if they came from a similar place, those traditions, or if there was just a lot of contact back and forth, sharing ideas.
Right, like who influenced who. And then there's this little detail. It seems so small, but it's really fascinating. Kerr mentions how Okinawan women carry heavy things.
Oh, yeah, and how that one little thing tells a bigger story. In the north, they use a band across their forehead. It's like how the Tayal people in Taiwan do it. But in the south, they balance stuff on their heads, more like what they do in Korea.
It's amazing, right, how you can see these different influences even in something so everyday. And then, of course, there are the tattoos.
The hand tattoos, Kerr talks about those, and the Katachishira hairstyle, too. He compares them to things you see in other island cultures, like the Yami people who live on a little island called Botel Tobogo, way down south of Taiwan. It really shows you how connected everything was back then.
It really makes you appreciate how complex Okinawan history is and how much of it is still alive today.
Exactly. We may not have all the answers, but it's clear Okinawa's past is rich, full of surprises.
So for everyone listening, we've only scratched the surface here. What are you curious about now? What mysteries would you want to solve about these ancient Okinawans? Maybe this is the start of your own deep dive? Thanks for listening.